podczas której mieliście Państwo okazję zagłosować w naszej ankiecie, jak oceniają Państwo przyspieszenie procesu.
So we asked you to take the poll regarding the acceleration of the process of digitalization, how this was sped up by the pandemic. Can I have the results of the poll, please? I guess they are not surprising, but still it's interesting that you assess this positively, but I believe that still a lot of things need to be elaborated on. So 78%. The second position, like the negative, and it says here that many things should be improved. Probably no surprises here. And now on to the last section in today's conference. We all know that the pandemic accelerated the digital changes. Our meeting today is also proof to that. This evaluation conference that is taking place online. We are often hearing that within 18 months, such changes happened that in a normal situation would take at least a few years. Many of us, for many of us, the changes improved work or life, especially in the case of students whose journey to school is normally long. On the other hand, it takes some time to adjust to the changes. One thing is for certain that the economy needed to adjust to the changes and could adjust to the changes, and we could start to function in the new conditions through remote work or study. And at the end of today's conference, of today's meeting, we will be talking about something else. The common usage of the digital world is not the only one challenge connected with these times. Within the 10 years, according to OECD, around 60% of the population will be living in cities. That's why we should examine the smart solutions used in the cities. This task was undertaken under a project by the Ministry of Funds of Regional Policy in cooperation with partners from the Visegrad group and the internal research team. And now the representatives of those who conducted the study will be presented the results of the evaluation of smart city solutions. Like with the previous presentations, we encourage you to become involved. You can use the Q&A in Zoom, or you can raise your hands and comment. And now over to the coordinator of the research team, over to Mikhail Valensky. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome from Warsaw and from Poznań. We are in two locations because this is an evaluation conference. I must tell you that it was an exceptional evaluation project. We did this in English because we had a team of experts from Poland, but also from Czechia, Hungary, and Slovakia. And in this situation, without remote work and remote means of communication, so we wouldn't be able to imagine this project. I have a new computer. I don't know how to change the slides. To start with, sorry, we are experiencing some technological difficulties. The very important thing to start with is that smart city, this is not just technology. This is what technology enables. But like with digitization, the true challenges start in the layer that is beyond technology. I'll start by introducing the team for this presentation. From Poznań remotely, we have Ania Borowczak, who coordinated all the experts from abroad. Ania works for EGO, and she deals with social and economic development. She has experience from working in Brussels. With me, I have Paulina Kozłowska, who is the project manager in my firm, our chief econometrist, but also specializes in qualitative research. She already conducted 2 interviews with respondents for another project. I also have Mirek Czerliński with me, who will not be presenting, but in our firm, he and Paulina conducted this project, because we have this habit that the key projects are always conducted by 2 managers. Because we are an evaluation conference, we wanted to share some practical information on how we work. My name is Mikhail Valensky, and I'm also an assistant professor at the Warsaw University of Economy in Warsaw. First, Ania will describe the client's expectations, what was the research problem, and how it was specified by us. We didn't want to understand smart city just as a technology, but not a set of technologies, but a set of opportunities provided by the technology to have better public policies, to have better cities, and to improve the quality of life.
Now we will tell you about specific projects that are interesting. We analyzed over 60 projects, so we won't be able to actually go through all of them in 60 minutes, but we will present you the most interesting ones. Because one comment from us, our survey was not strictly COVID-related research, but this presentation shows you the most interesting cases related to COVID, and then later on we will pass on to the relation between smart city and pandemic. And in the end, we will hear the crucial conclusions and recommendations. Thank you so much. Let me present you the research problems that were introduced by the previous speaker. So that international project was conducted throughout the whole year, last year. That was a big venture for us. It was based on 3 premises that have been discussed today. So the new programming cohesion policy period. So this is a very unique circumstance, COVID pandemic that was unraveling during the past year and affected our project significantly. And the third aspect that was not as discussed today, but is important to our research, to our survey, Poland is presiding over the Visegrad group, V4. So together with Czech Republic, Slovakia and Hungary, it was determined that smart city subject in the context of the new cohesion policy horizon is an important subject, and it is worth reviewing. And therefore, hence, we have undertaken the subject. So the first challenge that we had to face was the operationalization of the definition of smart city, because we have to remember that there are many definitions. There is no one main concept of smart city, or we can even say that we have 3 generations of those concepts. So you will hear about it during the Congress in June. Now it's the 3rd generation of smart city, and in the center we have a human citizen resident So the processes of participation, democratization of policies in the city, very well, but it doesn't change the fact that the fundamental link in every definition is the new technology and digital solution. Despite that, digital doesn't always mean smart. Therefore, the processes of managing the development are very important. And a smart way of using the technologies focused on improving the lives of the citizens. That is the key aspect of our approach. Why smart? I've already said it. Why city? Let me tell you that very briefly. As it was noted in the beginning of today's meeting, more and more people are living in the cities, are moving to the cities. In the past 50 years, the urbanization ratio in Poland and around the world increased so much that now more people live in the cities than those who live in non-urban areas. And this subject applies to all of us. A part of that, city is also a very special area for research, and then concentration of many people on a relatively small area comes with advantages and disadvantages. And in economy, we call them agglomeration effects. And some of them can be negative, so pollution, so congestion, so transport congestion that is related to dense population, but also the subject of today's conference. So the growing interactions between people on a small area, which results in a higher pandemic risk in urban areas. That's okay. Now, summarizing, smart city is a subject with potential when it comes to exploring new technologies, smart growth, which are at the heart of the cohesion policy for the past 10 years. And they affect most of us, most of the residents. But as the results of our project will show you, the cohesion policy only did not really touch upon the smart city subject to a great extent. So evaluation of smart city in the V4 group involved mostly the evaluation of good practices that we've actually noticed in our countries. But it was important to answer three questions that we've posted. So what kind of activities, strategic activities are implemented with the help of various strategies, programs on the national and local level? What are the good practices that can be observed and can be actually transferred to other countries, other V4 countries? But because we are scientists and evaluators, we were interested also in answering the question, what are the factors and mechanisms that condition a success of such smart city? What definition can be good for the decision makers, but also designers of smart technology? And now, analytical framework for our survey, our research, we've identified three main areas that have fundamental importance here. So technological dimension, a human dimension, so humana, and agora. we called this dimension Agora, and it is connected with effective management. So those three dimensions, important for smart city, translate well to the logics behind the projects that are the basic brick for our research project, where the technological dimension is just a mean to accomplish a goal, and the goal is the quality of life of the end user, who is the city resident, and the design processes have a fundamental importance for the success of the whole venture. As I've mentioned, the main area of our interest was to identify good practices. So this research was focused on the quality. So the methods and the data were qualitative. So we tried to ensure the optimum quality of the process and make it as objective as possible. And as I've mentioned, we had a team of experts from every member state in order to expand penetration of the environment of smart city projects and the research perspectives that were applied in our project. So we wanted to invite scientists, but also practitioners who are close to the concept of smart city. Well, we had three questions in the form of reviews, systemizing strategic documents, interviews with the representatives from the V4 group, and we've listed 56 case studies with good practices in a smart city area. And those projects were analyzed later on in a mixed research plan using a QCA method, qualitative comparative analysis that transposes the data in a binary way in a quantitative model. And now about the projects that we've identified in the V4 group. Well, our goal was to find 56 good practices because of the potential of our countries that differs, varies from country to country. Well, different networks of cities. So in the beginning, we've believed that 40% of good practices, and I will actually tell you more about that later on. So around 40% have potential. And that's why they will come from our country, because our country is bigger, and 60% from the remaining V4 member states. And we were actually able to deliver this goal more or less. Out of 165 good practices collected, 64 were Polish, 40 Hungarian, 36 Slovak, and 25 Czech. Why was that very difficult? You'll learn about that in a moment, because it was not enough to have good idea, but they had to be good ideas, good projects implemented in 10 areas of city functioning, which, according to our methodology, were connected with very specific technologies. So we had to find a very concrete and good projects in those 10 crucial areas. Some of them were multidimensional anyways. So in the context of pandemic, the pandemic context will be presented in detail by Paulina, but in general, our projects helped us to form conclusions as follows. So firstly, when it comes to the technology, right now there are solutions that based on sensors, detectors in real time. Every third project is financed by public money. Most of them, if they are financed like that, they are financed by the cohesion policy, but the potential of this policy is really big. Every fourth project focuses on interoperability of the solutions, which is a very desired feature. So the possibility to cooperate with other systems, but also to exchange old technology and replace it with a new one. And so that's a very important feature of the SMART project. Our survey, our research was conducted in big and small and medium-sized cities. And a very good conclusion is that when researching the good practices, well, nearly half of the projects can be universally applied in every city, regardless of the size. But also, we've also noticed the projects that because the effect, scale effect, could be applied only in big agglomeration, in functional area, and those include, for instance, automatic subway, automatic metro in Budapest. So it's really hard to imagine that this could be applied outside of really large cities. But what's interesting, we also identify, well, less, but we also identified projects that could be implemented successfully in small cities, such as smart waste bins, which are a very good solution. And implementation of this project in big cities would be very expensive. And in the pandemic context, the agglomeration effect that is negative that we want to counteract, that we want to prevent, we've identified two main features of our projects. So firstly, they increase the resilience to the effects of pandemic, regardless of whether they were developed in that direction. And there is another group of projects that was actually developed in response to pandemic, and they directly support the fight against COVID-19. And in the end, I'd like to show you an example of the good practices sheet that applies to one of the projects, and we created it as the final effect of our research. We have 56 projects in 10 areas. And here, as what you can see here is an abbreviated information about it, because in reality, our descriptions that were subject to our case studies were much more elaborated, but that's to be read in the publication. So this is a very short version, brief version with the information on the key projects. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. As Ania has said it, we've identified two features of our projects necessary to function during pandemic, so resilient to the effects of pandemic or supporting fight against pandemic. And sometimes they intertwine, but we would like to actually discuss them with examples and good practices. So the first one is the resilience to the effects of pandemic. So first, they limit the interactions between people, and those projects included for instance, the solutions that you just saw. So the solution in remote voting in Jaworzno. This is for conducting the remote voting and public consultations safely using the elections voting technology. The list also includes e-control of SPPN in Warsaw, limiting the number of pedestrian controllers, patrols in the area. So using the cameras that actually control it. And this simplification decreases the number of patrols. And also smart heat distribution network in Warsaw. And this solution helps the company to remotely review or monitor the heat distribution network in Warsaw and respond to any irregularities. And other type of projects use the non-contact technologies, where this technology was the starting point, Libros, for instance. So this popular e-register that supports remote learning and communication with parents and teachers, but also the progress of students in learning. But during the pandemic, this project supported remote learning by enabling remote classes, sending homework and keeping the materials, storing the materials. Another solution is the chat box prepared by InPost company, so that actually provides information about services, about parcel locations and so on. Whereas the projects that support fight against the pandemic.
So we are now talking about the telemedicine solutions like e-zdrowie, e-health, digitization at software and hardware level of the entire healthcare system in Hungary, as well as bottom-up initiatives, mobile application Zachranka, which aids emergency connections. Also, MONSE needs to be mentioned as systems for monitoring the health of the elderly who are living by themselves. We'll be talking about this in greater detail later. This is not just support during the pandemic, but also in other conditions, shaping the resilience of cities. So when people need to stay at home. Another area addressed is public security, and on the list we have the Polish ProtegoSafe app, verifying or actually tracking the users' contacts with those infected with coronavirus. The app also enables getting information about vaccinations, about the procedures when one gets infected, and about the general status of the pandemic. Also interesting are solutions like Smart City Poznań, a mobile app which is here because it has the e-alert function, and also pilot solution, visual crowd detection used by the city of Gdynia last year. Fighting the pandemic or mitigating its negative impact is also supported by all sorts of solutions used in the areas where access to public services was limited. Educational solutions, for example, Libros already mentioned, but also Mosaic, the digital school implemented in Hungary. This has not just the register functionality, but also gathers the e-resources for the purposes of remote lessons. Quite many projects were connected with e-management in cities, remote errands using the electronic signature, as well as data obtaining and distribution. As an example, we can quote the Prague Solutions Gulemio, which covered data administration and providing data to residents. We are now presenting 4 solutions from all the V4 countries from different areas. And the first one is the chatbot introduced by InPost. The chatbot is a computer program imitating human behavior. In this case, it automates answers to questions. The frequently asked questions when the user contacts the hotline. The chatbot is available through the app, Messenger, and WhatsApp, and Google Assistant, and it makes it possible to check the status of the delivery. This was a challenge for us, I must say, because it's actually a solution. It's a private solution, not a strictly a smart city solution, but we decided to include it because the parcel stations and the entire growth on the e-commerce market shapes the city area and city logistic. At the start of the pandemic, when the access to shops was limited, there was a massive growth of the e-commerce market. This has already been mentioned during the first panel today, and consumers' behaviors changed. Internet sales grew and the traditional businesses moved online. So quite soon it was observed that the demand for courier and parcel station services actually exceeds the potential of courier companies. That is why a solution like the chatbot from InPost Chatbot Mat was the answer to the first challenge of the pandemic. The next project already mentioned today as well is Mosaic, implemented in Hungary. This is a set of tools. Actually, it's a comprehensive educational tool which consists of elements for both learning on site for the teacher. The teacher can use the interactive display in the classrooms. There are also multimedia materials, e-textbooks, and other resources needed for learning at home. These are the tools available to both teachers and students. As regards the additional elements of the solution, it of course includes the administration tools for schools. That's why we believe it is a comprehensive solution. It covers all the subjects and all the topics from the lessons, as well as additional materials intended to encourage students to learn by themselves. In principle, they make lessons more attractive. The previous speakers said, when talking about the challenges of remote learning, they emphasized not just the students' limited access to technology, but also limited efficiency of remote learning and inequalities growing. And they said that one of the conditions where remote works developed was the lack of access to e-resources, to e-textbooks, and other materials. And in the face of the challenges for both the teachers and the students, attention must be paid to the fact that this mainly affected the sharing of knowledge, because there are problems with concentration at home, and particular students have specific predispositions for remote learning. And on the other hand, there are the limited skills, both teaching skills and digital skills on the part of teachers, and the lack of possibility of taking part in additional classes. This all resulted in lowered efficiency of teaching and learning. And a task like Mosaic is to make it possible for teachers to generate materials attractive for the students. And the time that was spent on preparation of the materials now that used to be spent on the preparation of materials before, now the teacher can spend this time with the student. Another solution is the Czech solution, Zahranka. Zahranka, that is the ambulance. It enables e-alerts like video calls with the casualty. And in the face of the limited efficiency of the health care system, where attention was focused mainly on mitigating the spread of coronavirus, this actually helped management of resources and mitigation of the negative impact. This was possible to more precisely tailor the measures to the events. The formula of the project is interesting. It was a non-profit project and it took a lot of arrangements because the local dispatch centers and other institutions. In our study, we paid attention to that because of the specific process. And the last solution is the Slovak system MONSE. This is a system for the health of seniors living living on their own. The system covers information provided to the carer of the elderly, and in the quarantine time, leaving home was discouraged. It is worth emphasizing that this solution was designed in quite a user-friendly manner. Namely, it took account of the motor problems of the elderly, plus using the solution did not require technology knowledge. And now on to VOOM, the only project on which the pandemic had a negative impact. So it's like additional benefit, and in the application one can plan the journey, finance it both by public transport, co-shared transport and taxis. And actually, we are already dealing with this trend now. When remote working became more common, a drop was recorded in demand for regular journeys, which led to the lowered interest in the app. Coupled with a rather unfriendly interface, so described by the users, it compromised the popularity of the application, and now it's a multimodal journey planner, but we believe that mobility budgets have a potential, and not enough time was devoted to them. We hope that the solution will develop, which is reflected in the letter of intent that was recently signed. And on to the key findings of our research. Certainly, a smart city is simply a resilient city. A smart city understood not just as the sum of technological solutions, but as designing cities in such a way that makes it possible to use the benefits of technology. we talked about the e-learning solution from Hungary. These were ready-made lessons for teachers. Residents using digital services adapt to reality. And where the solutions were prepared earlier, during the pandemic, it was a win situation. Those who tried to build digital solutions during the pandemic, they very often found their way to our list on best practices. And if they did not stand out. What stood out and what was a winner during the pandemic were the services enabling remote contacts, minimized interpersonal contacts, and we believe that to some extent that's also an investment for the future because it helps to limit moving about or emissions or infrastructure occupancy. On the other hand, Smart City supported the fight with the pandemic. First of all, the healthcare and telemedicine. These are the obvious examples, but also monitoring of seniors at home. This is not just for the times of the pandemic, and this lifts the burden from the overburdened healthcare system. Crowd detection system from Gdynia was very interesting, and the photo detection, we believe this is of a significant importance for managing the cities in the future. For example, for letting more buses on the streets, the routes where people wait for them. Avoiding contact with those infected, a very big progress of e-services in administration. More and more things can be done remotely, and let's hope this will stay with us. To get back to the general conclusions from the study, first of all, the smart city projects, from the point of view of what we are talk about at evaluation conferences, from the point of view of the cohesion policy, these are projects completely different than the typical cohesion policy projects. When we are building a motorway, a hospital, a university campus, we are building them to serve us for as long as possible. We are building them for years, while the specific character of the smart city projects consists in creating a certain ecosystem which we want to be flexible. We want this ecosystem to change, to improve, to adjust to various solutions. And this is a completely different thing than a motorway or a building where we expect the lasting component. Of course, we expect the system to be lasting, the ecosystem to be lasting, but it also with the flexibility component of the particular solutions, and creating such an ecosystem with the support of the cohesion policy and other public policies is a major challenge. This was also proven by the fact that so many projects that we studied were the standalone projects, not connected with ecosystems, and second of all, they were private projects. On the other hand, we had the VOOM example, which fell, did not succeed, among other things, because it was not supported by cities, not financially, but city transport organizers were not opening up to such services. The second conclusion is that in the V4 group countries, we have cool projects. We are using the technologies, but we are not the avant-garde. We are just solid. A slightly disturbing conclusion is that when we talk to the respondents, ask them about the topics of public support, about the EU funds, the public policies, most of them, they just opened their eyes wide and they said that they had their private projects and they had no idea whatsoever what we are asking about. The second side of the coin is the lack of the holistic support for the smart city initiatives. The first attempts are being made, but from the point of view of the projects, it was not visible that the projects of creating like big smart cities, which are in some cities strategies. So we didn't see the attempts bearing the fruit of projects that would fit with the good practices template. We identified two groups of projects. We had the cutting-edge projects, totally new solutions, totally new technologies, and the other group are those that implement the ready, proven solutions. Two different types of smart city projects, very different, and both of them should be the subject of public policy. So we should implement, multiply good solutions, but we should also develop and create a totally new solutions creatively using technology, for example, video detection, in order to identify crowds. For example, crowds on buses, either temporary or permanent. This information can be obtained. There is monitoring, but this is not happening. Our goal, our target is the smart city ecosystem, not smart city projects, but in the Polish cities, in V4 cities, we want to have a full, complete smart city systems. If a technology becomes obsolete, it is replaced by a new one. The rest stays. For such smart city ecosystems, there were projects where, on the one hand, there was support from the cities. The support from the cities is important, and the ecosystem, unlike a good project, it can't be standalone. But on the other hand, it's very important that when having public support, it's important to think about the user. When there is public support, very often there are projects which, unlike commercial projects, don't have great interfaces, and actually both have to be implemented. And where smart city ecosystems appeared, where the cities designed it all, where the cities tried to treat users and other stakeholders as the core of the project, center of the project, the human element rather than the automatic element, the technology. The barrier, the lack of the uniform definition of the smart city and the myths around the smart city were kind of problematic. But what I want us all to remember from this presentation is that smart city is not just about technologies.
It's the city that actually creates those technology, uses the technologies, and based on the technologies, they offer something nice to the citizens, residents connected with COVID or climate changes. A big barrier for smart city projects were the legal regulations. For instance, this example was not presented here. This is the sector which is the future. It requires regulations, and we cannot wait for those regulations for years. The regulators must be more responsive and adjust to new sectors quicker. And in the end, a good smart city is an investment for the future. And no matter how it works, what it is, so pandemic, elderly, society, well, this will be a good solution. And in the end, some recommendations, systemic recommendations. So firstly, by investing in smart city, we have to firstly invest in the cities, skills, trainings, study visits, but also pilot projects, small implementations, maybe risky, but small ones, instead of big ones such as motorway construction. It's also important to co-finance and create the teams responsible for smart cities in the cities, because this is a completely different managing of project than construction of school or road. If we want to be the producer, not only consumer of those solutions, it's important that we invest not just as city and purchasing solutions in a box, but it's important to invest in people and companies that create smart fit cities. So investment funds, incubators, but also pilot projects, risky projects, new ambitious projects, especially in the big cities, metropolis, because small and medium-sized city should use those solutions and purchase them together often. For instance, Ciechanów smart waste bins. This was the project done by several medium-sized cities that actually created it, and so they are able to actually improve the situation of cereal producers, manufacturers of such solutions that can later be exported to other countries. It's important to take a look at the law. So the regulator must anticipate and actually respond well to the solutions. And in the end, the evaluator should see the evaluation, step aside and look at it, because before group member states never gave us answers to all questions. This is a typical conclusions in the end of every researcher, but it's really good that we've met, that we've described so many nice and interesting solutions from V4 group, but definitely we should be comparing them to smart cities around the world if we want to be the producers of smart city solutions. This is where we find ecosystems, smart city ecosystems, systems and solutions, how they were supported by administration central in terms of regulation, administration and financing. But our report will soon be published, made public, and we are still working on the recommendations. That's why we say these are the proposals for recommendations. We are very interested in your comments, but actually what is happening, the analysis of what is happening in our countries is quite interesting. And we are also interested in your questions. So on behalf of the whole research team, I'd like to thank you for staying with us until the end. 119 people, well, that's great. I hope you'll stay with us until the end of the conference. Well, your appeal was for the discussion, and this discussion happened. We have one question, and the digital services and the quality of those services. The quality of those services decreased by any chance? Maybe the contact with the contact is maybe not that good. If I understand the intention of the asker, we often deal with many ideas that are just instant ideas. And our digitization in the recent year, in the last year, was mostly limited to the solutions that you are not really showing, but to taking a photo of a document and sending it to the official institution. Well, what's your approach to the quality of digital services? So first of all, the literature says that digitization is not supporting processes as they are right now with the help of digital tools, but digitization is about modifying the processes with the help of the technology. Of course, this is a big challenge. Well, of course, I always give the example of the ticket machine in the bus, where I still have to choose what kind of ticket I want to buy, whether it will be 20-minute or 75-minute. And actually, this should be different, because if I want to go from in Poznań, from the central station to Jeżyce, and I should be actually given an automatic ticket for the time of my journey. And there are many ideas like that. This is what we have to learn, how to use the technology to create the best possible services. So cameras assembled in the buses, well, for instance, at 5, the bus is overcrowded and this is detected. These are small things, but this is crucial. So digitization and smart city and all those solutions, IT solutions that are often not a digitization. They are often not smart city because they don't feel that to a full extent. Thank you so much. And I am a big fan of your project. It is indeed very interesting, and the final conclusions will be available in July, more or less. We can also ask questions about this project, send them to the email address that is provided. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your knowledge and your conclusions. Thank you. Michał Wolański, Anna Borowczak, Paulina Kozłowska, they were our guests. Thank you so much. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we are coming to a closing time today, closing our first day of conference. First of all, I would like to thank our guests, our speakers, our interpreters. You can't see all of them here on the screen, but they did a huge work. And I would like to thank those who are behind cameras. I can see them. And with their help, we were able to conduct this conference. And tomorrow we will have another day of the 14th International Evaluation Conference, and we will be focusing on how pandemic affected research area. And we will offer you very interesting discussions about pandemic and post-pandemic research reality. What are the opportunities and limitations of those research tours? There are both sides to everything, as you can see, based on today's discussions. We will also present the examples of how to use the data. This is something that can help to further develop the country in terms of socially and economically, big data. So definitely I encourage you to join us tomorrow. Thank you so much. My name is Karol Tokarczyk, and for the past 6 hours, I had the opportunity to be with you. So thank you so much, and see you tomorrow.